You've got to be really, really good at your job, the best of the best, or AI will begin to disrupt and replace.
Where are we in a parallel from the internet to where we are now with AI?
We're still on dial-up. We're still at like 14.4 baud modems.
This is the weakest AI technology will ever be,
Yep.
but this is the moment in time to continue to understand it and understand how to use it, understand how to innovate with it, understand
Absolutely.
how to automate with it.
One of my recommendations is like invest in vertical AI.
I want to take all my vectors of data and, create my second brain. That's
Absolutely.
what we're doing, right?
Yeah. But you have to understand the implications of giving ChatGPT access to an entire cloud drive.
You can do things at scale and much cheaper with current product sets that are already out in the marketplace.
As long as you're creating really valuable content, nobody cares
Right.
if you're using AI, right?
I've spent 2 decades guiding CEOs and founders to scale and reimagine what's possible. Now, the biggest shift of our lifetime is here, AI. I'm Seema Alexander, founder of Disruptive AI, co-chair of DC Startup and Tech Week, and the host of the AI CEO podcast. If you're ready to learn how AI is transforming industries, creating new growth, and rewriting the rules of business, this is the podcast for you. Because the truth is, the leaders who adapt now won't just survive, they'll define the future. Let's tap in. Welcome to today's episode of the AI CEO podcast. My name is Seema Alexander, and I am your host. Today, we have a special treat with you. Today, I have Sean Makulowich, the CEO of Ideaf Fire. He's an AI evangelist, educator, consultant, and friend. Someone I met in the tech space several years ago, probably 2-3 years ago at this point. Him and I were on an AI panel not too long ago. It was for the Founders Institute.
Yeah.
And I knew I had to have you on this podcast because our topic today is the future of AI in marketing, AI in sales, and we're going to get deep into innovation as well. And so, Sean, when I first started hearing all the things that you were working on and all your experience, I was like, you got to be on the AI CEO podcast and add so much value to this community. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Seema. I appreciate that. And very excited to do this show with you.
Yes.
Yes,
so
for sure.
We're just going to jump into it.
Let's do it.
All right. I want to ask you, what's the one truth about the future of marketing and sales that nobody wants to hear, but you say anyway?
You've got to be really, really good at your job. I mean, like the best of the best, or AI will begin to disrupt and replace certain tasks within certain sales and marketing roles. Perhaps not the entire role itself, but repetitive, non-cognitive tasks will be taken by generative AI systems, automations, things like that. So I think the sales and marketing professionals that prioritize learning AI and how it can augment marketing and sales strategies, better knowing your customers, better understanding data, being able to make really quick decisions from those insights gleaned, will stand out and will be secure and will thrive. But I think sales and marketing professionals who are just kind of sliding by or not trying to learn AI and leverage it to make their job easier at the end of the day and make them better at their job, who want to excel, climb the ladder, you'll start to see disruption there, and it will be challenging.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to go really deep into a lot of the context that you just shared.
Sure.
But I want to give a little bit of history in the beginning, because I know when you and I chatted, emerging technology is something you almost grew up in the womb because of your father, right?
Yeah.
And, I think with that sort of understanding, maybe you can share a little bit of background on that and how you've grown up sort of understanding and embracing this emerging space in multiple categories, but specifically in AI.
Absolutely, I would love to. I joke that it's genetic, right? Shout out to my dad, Sean Makulowich. He got me into tech. He was into tech very early. He was obsessed. He worked at various different companies in different roles, much like I did. I worked in the corporate world for a decade before starting my own firm. But he was at Booz Allen Hamilton doing consulting. At one point, he was doing shipbuilding. He worked at NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. The last job he was at before he passed was NIH. He was the director of National Cancer Institute speechwriter and was focused on communication. So did a bunch of different stuff, got bored easily, just like me. But a lot of focus of his writing and communications and job was looking at technology, specifically the internet, the World Wide Web, and what it would change, what would come out of it, which was really exciting. But yeah, I mean, I started building computers with my dad around 11 years old. Mm-hmm. I was born in '82, so that was the same time the World Wide Web came online, which I think was '93. So, that was back in dial-up modems and
I know all about it, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely, and compact discs and stuff like that. So
yes.
I just had this obsession with technology. Like my dad and I would take stuff apart, put it back together. It started with like erector sets, right? And like I had the little chemistry sets, and I had like the little computer motherboard sets where LEDs would go off and stuff. And I liked understanding how things worked. And it got me into trouble at some points, right? Not everything is supposed to take apart. But yeah, so I just followed in that trajectory, and got really into computers, design. I didn't so much want to go the programming route, which my dad encouraged me to, and he was right. He's like, HTML will be the future. It's how the web operates. And it was exciting. I learned some of it, but I much more was interested in the design, strategy, creative side. I always had this burning, creativity in me. I was drawing alien spaceships and robots when I was a child, literally.
You've been into sci-fi since,
absolutely.
Since the 80s.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I saw just the internet as being like a game-changing technology, and I look back on that, and there's a lot of parallels to draw to that with AI, which I know you do very articulately. Mm-hmm. And I just laugh because I remember, in the late 90s, I would talk to friends or different people about the internet or the World Wide Web, and they'd be like, yeah, it's cool, whatever, you can chat on it, you can look up information, but I think it's just a fad. And I was like, I don't think it's just a fad. I think, the access to information for people all over the world is just, and it's in the simplest terms, is going to change everything. And you look at it today, and it's far from a fad. So I think you can draw that parallel with AI. I mean, we are still in the very, very, very beginning stages of a technology that's unlike anything else.
It's funny you say that, because there was in my keynote, why AI is bigger, bigger than the advent of the internet. I have a slide that has a newspaper article that says, "The internet, is it really real? Is it a fad?" Right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think I'm hoping at this stage. Actually, yesterday on Instagram, I saw Obama do a reel on AI where he was like, just to get you guys to understand, this is not a fad. This is real. It's coming very fast. And sometimes it's like I was like, I've been preaching this. And look, I for me, it's been the last 3 years because of the exposure I got when I was advising a certain company that this phase is happening so quickly. But when leaders that people trust start to say it, that's when I'm hoping people are really starting to pay attention.
Yeah.
So where are we, because given your world in emerging tech for a long time, where are we in a parallel from the internet to where we are now with AI?
Dial-up. We're still on dial-up. We're still at 14.4 baud modems. Yeah, we're still using compact disc to install software, internet relay chat, instant messenger, nascent stages, truly. We'll probably talk about this more later, but AI is still being, for the most part, operated and controlled, monitored by humans, right? Once we get down the road a little bit, and when that occurs is still a question. But once we get into recursive self-improvement and models start really improving themselves on their own without a lot of guidance and start doing decision making, long horizon planning and reasoning, that's where you're going to start to see a strong paradigm shift and some real existential crises will arrive, because we can't, then it's out of our control, right? And there's a lot of companies, Ilya Sutskever's Safe Superintelligence, Mira Murati, two people who left OpenAI for their lack of, focus on guide rails and security and things like that, I think will be under the microscope for leading part of that charge to try to really advance this technology and, get to AGI, get to super intelligence, but, somehow putting guardrails in place. So I think we're still at dial-up. I mean, stuff is moving quickly, but I think there's a lot of people, the average person, you and I live and breathe in it. But I think the average person, it's helpful. I use it for this and that. They don't really.
I use it for ChatGPT and some emails and content.
Sure, exactly, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And the average person doesn't even know which model to use. And that's something we can get into later. Like ChatGPT 5, hopefully, will consolidate everything into one model, and it'll have dynamic inferencing. So it'll know if you need to think more or not.
Yeah.
Right. So I think
I'm going to pause you for a second because
please.
we're going ahead in a good way.
Sure,
in
absolutely.
a good way. But I mean, partly it's like I wanted people to understand, we say we're at a certain place where the internet was, but understand how much progress has happened since.
Oh, absolutely.
So again,
absolutely.
Something to repeat over and over again. This is the weakest AI technology will ever be.
Yep.
So. But this is the moment in time to continue to understand it and understand how to use it, understand how to innovate with it, understand how to automate with it. I mean, you touched on multiple things around where the power of the stages of AI are going to head. But I'm going to bring us back for a few minutes.
Absolutely,
okay?
absolutely.
Only because I want to anchor people into the present.
Sure.
And then we're going to get into all the other stuff.
And I can go back to how, my background in tech and obsession with it evolved into AI and how that, became a business application, which is exciting.
Well, yeah. And I think that's exactly where I want to go because I think one of the things that you and I share in common is that we know the art of marketing and sales is changing.
Yeah.
Dramatically.
Big time.
Dramatically, right?
Yep.
When anytime we do anything, we focus on functional areas. When we do anything with Virgin or just in general, it's like the marketing, the sales, the ops, the product, all of these functionalities, even in today's world with AI, are and will be disrupted.
Absolutely.
Right? And so just let's I'm going to ask you, what do you believe the modern marketing function will look like in an AI native company? When I say AI native for the community, that means they're an emerging company. They're thinking about AI from the beginning. What does that look like if you had your druthers?
AI is integrated from inception to execution. Beginning to end. So, from the very early stages of planning and discovery and research, you're using AI to sift through massive data sets of customer data, of survey data, of product data, traffic analytics, and glean insights quickly, and then use that to build a strategy and use generative AI to help with that strategy using that data. And then move forward to a pilot campaign and hyperpersonalization. So, taking those large data sets that AI analyzed very quickly, gleaned insights from, and then hyper-personalizing, whether it's text, whether it's email, whether it's social media, advertising, or some other channel, hyper-personalization, we know it's been proven works really well when people feel like you're talking to them.
That's right.
And you use context like, they bought this product, or they attended this event, or you can connect it to them personally. They don't, it doesn't feel as much as like a mass blast, right? So, when you talk about AI native marketing and sales functions, it's just from beginning to end, right? And you always have a human in the loop. You have sales and marketing people with, deep expertise in their sector, right? That are in the loop. They're evaluating the results that come from the generative AI responses and things like that, and using it as a tool and an augmentation to just move faster, move smarter, using data. I really want to emphasize that point. Not enough companies use data to make decisions.
Well,
period, full stop.
Period, full stop. But that's the difference between the internet, where we're getting access to data now with AI. You're actually using the data to make decisions real time, right? And then to your point in marketing is going to be focused on everything in AI. If you use it right, will be focused on personalization and precision. I use those words probably every podcast.
Yep.
Because what's interesting about your background is hyper-personalization. I think your story with AI, we didn't get fully into it. It started in 2015, right?
14. It was when Google acquired DeepMind, and I have invested in Google stock for a while, and so I watched what they were acquiring, and I was like, oh crap, like this company is doing some incredible things. And so that's when I really started studying it and kind of obsessing over it.
Yeah,
in 2014.
but then you shared with me that there was a particular Adobe software that you got deeper in with Marketo and other things, and Magento, I think.
Yep.
But my whole point of that dot connecting was hyper-personalization was your focus then. So maybe share what the AI at that moment did, and then where we are today, and in terms of like how much more can we hyper-personalize today?
Sure. So so the context is 2019. I was working on a long-term contract with a global scientific organization. We were building an e-commerce store in Magento. And this was not long after Adobe had acquired Magento. And for those in your audience who are unfamiliar with Magento, it is basically the top tier enterprise e-commerce software. And it's very powerful. It's an incredible platform. It's much more than a CMS. And at the time, once Adobe had acquired it, they developed a third-party API called Sensei. And this was a product recommendation engine driven by AI. And so the parallel there with hyper-personalization is what this API did is it took a lot of different data points that we defined. So previous purchases, type of purchases, the category that product was in. We even did some more sophisticated kind of data mining and correlations where we took IP address, correlated it to zip code, correlated it to household income. So we could
all
almost
the data that you possibly could receive within
that was contextually relevant.
Within the sales cycle, the journey,
Correct.
the consumer purchase journey. Okay.
And so the hyper-personalization there wasn't like, hi Seema, hi Sean, I saw you, attended this event, but it was much more so subtle and nuanced, right?
Yes.
So in real time, as an individual customer who was logged into the store was scrolling through the product pages, Sensei would populate that product page in real time with the data it knew about that customer.
Can I ask, was Amazon doing the same thing?
Not that I'm aware of. They may have had a similar tool in Azure. I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay.
Nobody had heard of this. I had to really study it and look at it before, doing it. But it was huge. I mean, it led to a significant increase in average order value. And so that was the inflection point. So I was like, oh crap, this is a real practical business use case for AI that has measurable ROI. And in 2019, even today, it's very difficult to define measurable ROI for AI, right? In certain areas. Some places it's easier than other, like retail, you can quantify it, etc. But back then it was, unheard of. And I was like, wow, this is big. And so I got really interested in the business use cases application. And then, kept, focusing on it, looking at AlphaGo, AlphaFold, some of the other platforms Google DeepMind was developing around machine learning and AI. And started learning about the transformer technology, which led to LLMs as we know today.
GPT.
Which is the T in GPT. Exactly.
So what is transformer technology? I don't want to digress too much, but I think that's important to share.
So in simple terms, it's basically a technology that takes natural language and puts it into a format that a generative artificial intelligence system can understand and then provide a response to.
Which is ChatGPT.
Right? But Perplexity, Gemini, Claude, Copilot all use the transformer technology.
Which are other large language models, in case you're not familiar.
Yes, exactly. So it's what allows us to talk to models, right? And several people have kind of used the analogy of large language models as like the ultimate autocomplete system, right? Because it's very good at guessing the next token or word or phrase based on every previous conversation, but also like the nature of the word. It knows which word to focus on, like which words are important, right? And so the transformer allows you to have a conversation with that, neural network. Yeah, which is, a big part of is linear algebra, right? You can't talk to a model in its own language, which would be linear algebra, right?
That's so funny because I didn't think I'd ever use linear algebra ever when I was learning any of that stuff. But this is in the back of, obviously I'm not creating these models.
Sure. Me neither. Yeah. I don't like mathing. I'm not good at the maths, but that's what it is at the end of the day, right? So transformers let us talk to models. Yeah.
So the question then becomes, you saw the hyper-personalization at that time, 2019, right? 2022 happens, right? We're in this new phase of ChatGPT and generative AI and all the things that are happening with large language models. The AI is getting much smarter and stronger, but the weakest still. I think you and I know when we talk hyper-personalization, it's about one-to-one campaigns and messaging.
Yep.
And people are building infrastructure to try to get to that. So what I heard in your previous model was we're scraping through all the consumer purchase history, everything that we have in our system. My understanding of the future of marketing is that anything that's public, that's available from a legal perspective, can also be now scraped into a data set. So they are going to know, and like Meta already knows certain things when you're in their system or Instagram or whatever, right? But like if I'm speaking about something on reviews on, call it Reddit, or if I'm, making some transaction somehow, some way publicly, that could also be part of the model. And so then it becomes like what is important to Sean about a specific product. You might have a very specific message and nuance where what's important to Seema, and that nuance can get me to think, I need to purchase this. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree. Especially if you have, this personalization built into different touch points, right? Like, you've heard the phrase, you meet people where they are, right? So like, I think the more relevant, targeted, and timely, that marketing messaging that is hyper-personalized is, the more effective the outcome. Right.
So what's possible today, right? Because so we went from what you've seen in the e-commerce side, we then went to where we know the future is going to be. In hyper-personalization, where are we today?
Where we are today, I still think there's a long way to go with hyper-personalization, because I'm sure you get these emails from random people, that either reference LinkedIn, like, I saw you followed, Gary Sheffield's, or you liked Gary Sheffield's post. I don't know who he is. I'm not connected to him. I don't remember doing that. The systems are still they're still struggling a lot. They're grasping for something the person did on LinkedIn and use it as an opener. It's still the personalization. And it
feels so fake. It feels
so fake.
Please stop reaching. Spammy.
Yes.
Yeah, agreed.
I get several. I'm sure you do too. I get several of these a day. So there's a lot of room for improvement. And I think the bigger the blast, the bigger the batch, the harder it is to make it feel and sound personalized, right? Which is why I think it's really good for especially startup founders who are, doing, multi-channel marketing, to start with, segments. I always get shocked when I talk to, big or small companies, and I'm like, so what are your buckets in your email software? Like, what are your segments? Do you have VIP customers? Do you have haven't engaged in a while? I'm like, no, we just have an all contacts list.
Well, in the
beginning, I'm like, wow, what's your open rate? What's your click-through rate? And they're abysmal. And I'm like, so you're not even targeting based on how people engage with your brand? And a lot of them, the answer is no, so I think,
but can I speak to that for a second?
Of course, please. Yeah.
But the future of that is that you're not going to need to know.
Yeah.
And that what's going to happen, and this is just, again, I'm taking these extremes for a second, because we're going to get into what this means right now.
Yeah.
How do you imagine, your current system with where the technology is today? But in the future, agents are going to be able to do that for you. And it just started to tell you, this is not too long from now where you're going to be like, I need campaigns like this, or I need this or that, and it will just happen, right? Because the technology is there. But let's get into specifically, Sean, now if I knew all this stuff is coming in the future, fine, and it's good for the audience to understand, right, where we're headed with marketing. And that's just one piece. Hyper-personalization is one piece, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So if I'm trying to figure out my strategy in a company today, and I need to reimagine what this marketing function looks like. There's the sort of the outlook piece, and then there's the reality of right now. What do you advise companies right now?
Very simple. Listen. Actively listen. Actively talk to your customers. Ask them what they like, what they hate, ideas for new features. We talked about Founder Institute. I tell founders all the time, talk to your customers. Ask your customers questions. Surveys are great, and they help. But unless you have like thousands or tens of thousands of responses, you don't really have statistically significant data to make decisions from, right? You can't poll 100 people and ask them a question and, maybe like the majority of them lean one way. Like that's not, you don't want to make decisions from that small of a data set. So I think, the main thing is every company needs to really look into having a 24/7, 365 feedback mechanism, even if it's as simple as a widget on your website that says, tell us how we're doing, right? You've seen those little tabs in the bottom right. You can click it and it's like literally open-ended. It's like, and some of them have a thing that says, and the name field is optional. Like, so if you want to give anonymous feedback, sure, those systems will get, just haters or people that, you don't take serious, whatever, but you can gain really deep insights and it's like very low cost to do that. But if you have this like ongoing loop of direct feedback, not only does the customer feel valued, invested in using your product, which creates more affinity and loyalty to your brand, which are really good things, it helps you improve your product. And I'll give you an example. I'm a big user of Midjourney, have been since the start, and I love. And
Midjourney is something that an AI tool that you can prompt to create really great images.
Correct. Yeah, image generation, and it's, if you haven't used it, highly recommend it. It's just the images it creates are incredibly creative when compared to some other image generation tools. But last time I logged in, they had a major update, and as soon as the screen loaded, there was a pop-up box that said, we just released major updates, and it listed them in bullet points. And then below it, it had an open form field, and it said, do you like these features? Do you have suggestions for other features? And I was like, wow, like every model tells you the new features when you open it, right? And you haven't been into it since the update. But I've never seen any company tell you about the new features that just added. And the other thing was, you talked, we listened, right? So it's like we scraped all the Reddit data of you guys like screaming and crying about this or raving and loving this. And so we listened, we implemented all these things you requested. And by the way, this is an ongoing process. If you have other ideas, tell us. Like that, I was like, wow, that is brilliant.
So I have an example.
Brilliant.
So I'm the head of AI and data for Stanley Black & Decker on the podcast. And
awesome.
and it's really interesting because they focused on how to help support the customer experience before they focus on the internal experience, but they're doing a fabulous job with their AI adoption. Yeah. And they're like, sometimes we have like 7,000 reviews on some of our products, and it's like now they have a generative AI tool and an agent to collect that information, help prioritize the themes that they're seeing so they can give it to their product people to say, these are the, in your list of so many things on your product pipeline, these are the things that our customers really want to see. Right. And so then they have that communication, as you're saying, that they've started to make those changes, and they're starting to see the loyalty, the reviews, the satisfaction start to increase. So that's a perfect example. But I want to also just kind of strategically, like if I'm a chief marketing officer and I had look, when I think about the roles in marketing, campaign management, creative, right? Content development, digital, experiential, how, with this world, what we're seeing a lot of times is people are starting with the content, right? It's how do we create custom contextual models that they can help us support us with marketing materials, with blogs, with things that are in our own voice, if you will, so that we can augment a lot of that, give us a superpower for that. But all these other areas, what would your advice be to a CMO to say, now it's because the world of these tools are here, but then automation is here. And then AI agents are, enhancing things to really create more autonomous sort of workflows. So any thoughts on that?
Tons, but I'll try to keep it concise. I think as a CMO, one of the most effective ways to leverage generative AI is to look at your most loyal, biggest clients or customers, and build, something like a bespoke model for that client, or at the very minimum, a custom GPT, and train it and feed it all of the, marketing and sales related data, right? And I want to be clear, that does not need to include necessarily financial data or, sensitive data, right? But campaign metrics, like when you tell a model like what campaigns went really well, and you tell it the type of audience, and you give it behavior analysis for that audience, and you give it engagement metrics for that campaign and for that audience connected to that client, all of a sudden it starts to pick up on what works and what doesn't. So I think, and this is not new, right? This is not novel, but I think, the top CMOs and senior marketing professionals are really starting to understand that, we can build a persona of our client so that it already knows what's successful, what's not successful, not to just run the same thing that's successful over and over, but it takes A/B testing or multivariate testing to orders of magnitude more effective, because you can test lots of different messaging, test lots of different ad creative really quickly.
How?
And then the model remembers that.
Okay, hold on. I want to step back on a couple of things.
Sure.
So Jason Michael Perry, a peer of mine too, he did a demo once with the back end of ChatGPT. And he's like, this is how you create your own CMO, right? Your own chief marketing officer.
Yep.
And basically, you're sitting there. We're going to talk about prompting and meta prompting in a few minutes.
Sure.
But he basically described what a CMO's role was and put it into the back end of this playground, and then started, to your point, putting in, here's our campaign information, here's our marketing strategy, but then it was also, here are our competitors,
Yep.
here are campaigns that we thought did really well, here are things that we do not want to see, we have our KPIs, here's our 5-year plan. All of those things were inputted into the back end of this GPT.
Yeah.
And so then it allowed, again, the two words I always use in this world is context and, content and context, right?
Yep.
And then so you can start to use that as a system, a role, something that augment a lot of the information that you would literally be having to figure out and do all this testing on. And this is going to give you one leg up and multiple legs up on top of that, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so that was one piece that I just wanted to get people to understand. That's like the lowest hanging fruit.
It is. I mean, we build a custom GPT at minimum, sometimes much more robust solutions for every client we have.
Yeah.
So that we can, when they want a blog post or, a strategy or a content calendar or anything that needs to be hyper relevant to their brand, their product or service, their audience,
right,
their brand personality, you can spin it up much quicker in an enclosed,
closed loop system.
Closed loop system, exactly, using their data.
What does that mean?
Just that, so when you go into ChatGPT and you're just using 4.0 or 4.5 or 0.3, whatever model, it's trying to figure out what corpus of knowledge to draw from. And ChatGPT 5 will be a huge step forward. Is it'll know if it needs to think longer or do more reasoning, or if you're just asking it, to help you plan, a simple vacation trip, right? It'll understand if you want to do deep research or not. But so when you ask just a standard model, not a custom GPT or a bespoke model that's trained on company-specific data, context and content, it takes longer for it to, comb the internet, comb everything it's been trained on. Google's famously said, Gemini's watched 1 million hours of YouTube. Now, it's arguable whether that's a good thing or bad thing, right? Same with Reddit.
Yeah.
But I think, having this closed loop model where you choose the files, right? And we can talk about Google Notebook LM too, but all the frontier models do this, right? Gemini has gems, but when you're able to keep the context specific to one company, as opposed to just asking the model to search the internet and find case studies and, successful campaigns for like, types of companies or a sector, retail, whatever, that's one thing. But when it is hyper relevant and contextual to the company's data, who they serve, what they want to do, business objectives, it's much more effective, from all angles. Yeah.
I love that. So from your perspective, if again, I'm a CMO, and this is just, again, we just gave one context of a role, right? There's multiple ways to use it for campaign management. SEO is changing. There's lots of things. How about the people? So and this is
most important part.
Yeah. Are we over time? Because I keep hearing, and just from my own understanding, I mean, marketing is one of those areas that's going to be disrupted in a sense of there are going to be roles that are not going to be needed as much, but newer roles that I think are going to be much more relevant with the coordination of AI automations and AI agents. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, at the end of the day, I am an eternal optimist, not just with AI, but, most tech. I always try to see, the light at the end of the tunnel, if not the silver lining. And, I think it goes back to, what we kind of opened with and talked about in the beginning. Like, you're going to have to really get good at your craft, right? So one thing I think is a misconception is that, AI will just blanketly replace all sales and marketing people, top to bottom, relatively quickly. I don't think that's the case. And I do agree with you that while there will be disruption in sales and marketing and many other fields, entry-level programming, entry-level graphic designers, which we're already seeing significant disruption. I think many, many, many new jobs and types of jobs will emerge, and that's the silver lining. And I don't think even the most advanced frontier AI researchers can even think about or imagine what those are yet. I think they will slowly emerge, but I think one will definitely be focused on more and more sophisticated automation. Because, right now, automation's come a long way. Automation is not new. You look back even a decade, Salesforce, some of the bigger CRMs were doing some automations and email and all that
marketing, all had nudges. If you were doing any email marketing, the triggers, this or that, that's all automation. And then Zapier allows for other things to come together. But things have shifted with the newer models of Make and, like NAN, we talked about, I mean, these are things you may or may not know in terms of listening to these types of softwares. But what can be integrated, what can be automated has changed.
Absolutely. So, and it's just gotten so much more sophisticated.
So what does that mean? Maybe give some examples of marketing workflows that you can see that are getting automated today. Yeah,
and let me just start by saying, when we talk about automation and applications and use cases, the most immediate and impactful, which aren't necessarily the most disruptive, are repetitive non-cognitive tasks. The stuff people don't want to do. Data entry, really simple stuff where you don't really need to engage your mind. I'm not talking about like deep work where you're like thinking creatively, doing strategic planning, with other humans, on really important stuff. I'm talking about, like I said, data entry, writing the same email to the same client every week with a dashboard or data from their marketing campaigns.
Task-oriented things that take a long time 100%. That are repetitive.
Yep.
That's a low-hanging fruit.
Exactly. Yep. Absolutely. But I mean, in terms of automation, I think that the simplest way to look at it and try to use it and leverage it is look at a workflow or process and look at the different steps in it and figure out where the human needs to be who has the expertise, and where there's an area or a set of tasks that is like labor intensive, time consuming, where Make, Zapier, or an agent can take the place of that and then report back to you. I think people for some reason think that some automations are set and forget. They're finite. They're simple. Yeah. But there's other automations that, are pretty complex, but they need intervention, and they can surface data and wait for a response from the human. That's the way you do smart automation.
So let's put some examples, right?
Sure.
So I'll give you an example of what I'm doing right now for my podcast.
Sure.
Like, there's so many steps in pre-production
Absolutely.
and post-production.
Yeah.
From confirming guests, those emails that, again, need to go out, to figuring out, doing the research on the guests, putting in my prep interview, getting the right interview questions, sending out, there's so many steps in that pre-side.
Yep.
Then there's post, right?
Yep.
Then it becomes like, all right, now you have this long-form content, you have clips that are being made. What are the right captions for the right platforms? How do you continue to build a relationship with the guests? There's multiple steps.
Yeah.
I'm automating, I would tell you 85% of that right now, working
Absolutely.
with my partner.
Yep.
And why that is, and I can't wait, because that's my...
Because you can scale.
Because I can scale.
Exactly.
So this is just a really important thing, because everything needs to start with a big business challenge, the outcome. What are you focused on that you're struggling with today, right? And for me, once we have this in place, this is going to take hours away of me just consistently doing it. It was great for me to do it for a long time, and my team, right?
Yeah.
Because
we've
learned,
in the loop, right? But it'll save you
100%.
Tons of time, right?
I know the interview questions
key.
are not going to be 100%. I'll always have to tweak those, but they'll be 80% there.
Absolutely.
And
it'll get smarter and better.
Because I'm going to continue to train it, and I'm going to continue to fine tune it.
Right.
But it's I would say the next version of an SOP.
Yep.
But you're moving something we're also doing in Catterley with a product with Virgin called Catterley. But this concept of moving from to-dos to task intelligence,
Yep.
Yep. And I think that I love anchoring. I get the larger automations and the flows are going to change, but is there any specifics? I want people to hear any specific examples that you may have.
Yeah, I'll give a real, hopefully lucid one, and this kind of gets to where tools and agents are. So earlier this week, I built a tool in Google AI Studio that allows you to put in your company, your website, and then 3 competitors' names and their websites. And this agent will go off and review each of their websites, search for social media icons or links on those websites in the header or footer or wherever they exist if there's a feed, then go scrape as much data from those social media feeds or channels that they can, and then report back every week on any new content that competitor has published with low-hanging fruit keywords, so keywords that have high intent and high volume. Blog articles, news, acquisitions, but then also recent social media posts and a summary of it. And then also, it's smart enough to pull the engagement metrics, so it can show comments, likes, and shares for each post from each competitor.
Right.
So once a week, you can get a report of your top 3 competitors, what they've published to their blog, news, big news they've come out with, and a summary of any social media content they've put out there. So if you're in a competitive landscape, like SaaS or AI or that area, it's good to keep an eye on what the competition is putting out, what they're doing, so that not so that you can copy it, but you can do it better, right, or bigger.
But that would have taken a marketing analyst or market research analyst to do a lot of that work, which every week by week this is one of your tasks. But now an agent can do that for you in seconds, right?
Yeah.
This morning, I actually had the CEO of a company called Odaptos on. I think that right now is the release of his podcast, but I'd seen him originally at Techstars.
Yeah.
And so he's created an AI-enabled empathy system, he calls it, but the reality is he's disrupting market research.
Interesting.
And what he's doing is, in the way to get to market research, many companies do focus groups, right? And
absolutely.
they spend 20, 30,
costly,
50,
time-consuming.
And almost biased in certain ways, right? Because I used to do a lot of focus groups when I was young. You get paid for them, but I also have a big mouth, so I'm talking a lot more than most people because I have an opinion.
But they appreciate that, right? Some people are just I like it, I don't like it.
Exactly.
Right? That's not what they're looking for.
No, I know, but you can
right?
lead the conversation.
So you were probably the most valued person in it, yeah.
Yeah, but that takes away from the continuous conversation of the others, right?
Sure.
But so his system is that he does these interviews that are non-guided and they're videotaped, but he has all these AI-enabled skills, call them, that are tracking intent recognition, that are tracking emotions. Emotions is a big one. That are tracking the way their gestures are. Every aspect of it includes computer learning, and so what you receive from it is real-time contextual feedback that is like very specific, that he's saying from a consumer buyer's perspective. He's like, I can tell you when somebody's going to purchase something 8 seconds before they even think about hitting the return button. I can tell you specifically from the content, like if they're going through your product, here's the exact place that they would convert and you need to spend more time on. Here's the places that you really need to change. Here's some recommendations. He's actually recreating the entire flywheel, because after that, once you have these types of learnings, and to your point, this is like an opportunity to have consistent learning from customers, because he's taking something that would cost thousands and thousands of dollars, and for 20 interviews it's like $400.
Wow.
Like, it's like nothing. It's peanuts. And obviously enterprise corporate, it would be a little different, right?
Yeah. But the values.
But then he's extending it to say now, okay, this is the type of challenges or conversations that your customers are having. We're going to create the content associated to that. So now you have a flywheel of content, of blogs that you can start to put on that are very relevant. And was something I shared with him today was like, now you can also take the way they speak about the problem and speak about the actual the problem and the product, and use that in the marketing materials.
Absolutely.
Because that's going to sell more than what we assume, that this is what people are seeking, and using our own marketing language versus what consumers are actually asking for.
Yeah.
And so that's an AI-enabled innovation for marketers.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's something that, again, disruption, $40,000-$50,000 to $400 for 20 interviews.
Yeah.
Like that's what the world we're in today.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, I think, that's brilliant. And I mean, especially when you think about CPG and retail, like there is patterns in behavior, the way people move around a store, right? Walmart's famous for looking at how customers move through the store. Costco does this as well, to basically position products in certain places, like we were talking about before, meet people where they are,
right? But
also talk to them in their own language, right? There's nothing more effective than that when you're trying to get a product in front of someone. But you can predict intent, the way someone moves through a store, right? And an AI can scale that up, right? So you have a couple thousand people in your store in a day. You can take that imagery and machine learning, image recognition and machine learning, and say, what is the average or expected path of someone through our store? And then whichever brands pay the most to get those end caps, that's where you put them, right? So that's a really exciting innovation. That's just another reason I love,
but that's
what AI can do.
But the example that you just shared, that's something that could have been done before this next phase, right?
Yeah.
But it's more
Not
accessible.
as easily.
But it's more accessible.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the key, right?
Yeah.
It's like machine learning and AI have been around 75 years in some capacity, right?
Absolutely.
But I almost felt like it was sci-fi before, before now. But something like that's using, and the big words of computer vision, and that basically means it's just staring at all the things that you do.
Which we've been doing for a very long time.
Right?
Yeah.
And then but to your point of that example, it's like now you can create real business decisions.
Absolutely.
Quickly. Do you think people in that market already do that?
In retail?
Yeah.
No, I think retail is still stuck in its old ways. I'm seeing some innovation in certain retail, where they're using Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, people's devices to kind of figure out how they're moving through stores, and things like that, and then take that data, extrapolate it, and do product placement certain ways, or even staffing, right? On volume. But I think there's a lot of room for improvement. And I think in the CPG world and the retail world, it's all about creating a memorable brand experience, right? So that people are so enamored by your products, your brand, or the experience with someone representing that brand that they're like, damn, that was awesome. That was an awesome experience. And they want to tell their friends about it, right? I think that those are the brands. The brands that are able to do that, and much easier said than done, will win. You know what I mean? The retail brands, the CPG brands that are taking a really hard look at their customers, they're talking to them, they have feedback mechanisms, they incentivize surveys that they get rich data from, right? Not everyone wants to tell you, how you're doing, but sometimes a very, little thing that's a low cost to you could get some insight out of people.
Which is also traditional marketing, right?
Absolutely,
Or traditional market research, right?
Of course,
but
yeah. That's the name of the game,
it's
right?
The name of the game.
It's due diligence and research.
But what's the difference is there's tools today. Like I remember I have another founder in the travel space and hospitality, and she said, I did 900 surveys from my marketplace, whatever, to get to this product. And I'm like, how'd you do 900 surveys? I was like, that's a lot of surveys.
Clone yourself?
No, she had an AI tool for that.
Yep.
And unfortunately, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but she sent it to me.
Yeah.
And but my point is that you can do things at scale and much cheaper with current product sets that are already out in the marketplace. So if I was a CMO, I actually had Laura Shushnek on my pod a couple weeks ago. She's a COO of Wisewire. If you haven't listened to that podcast and you're really trying to sort of DIY your whole overall AI strategy internally, it's one that I really suggest you listen to. One of they're in an ed tech company. They're design thinkers by trade, right? And so she went in and told her staff, like, you know what? Everyone's going to start tinkering with AI, all the functional people. 3 months in, they started playing with different tools. They got finally into a place that were like, all right, now if you had your druthers, go out and tell me what's the best AI systems or tools or agents or workflows we can create that are going to get us to these sort of outcomes. And we want to make sure our production for our content is at a certain level, quality has to stay high, opportunities for innovation, and just the regular operational automation. They're at 40% up in ROI right now. Their internal tech stack, I mean, it's like peanuts compared to what they used to pay because they're using different tooling and some enterprise tooling for sure. But the point is that she gave permission to her functional people to play. And I just think that's
brilliant.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And I think in contextual for a CMO, it's like, there are definitely we know there's certain jobs that are going to be disrupted over time, right? But if you let your people play, the goal is that they found ways to automate a lot of the crap work. And then you use them for higher level stuff. And you and I chatted a little bit about experiential marketing, but it's like this. Marketing is also relationships, right?
Absolutely, 100%.
Marketing is also
always
brand.
Will be,
It always will be, right? So there are other ways you can use your people in a much more strategic way once you get rid of the layer of the things that can be, automated or
absolutely.
Build out intelligence. Anything else on the marketing side? I want to move to sales for.
Sure. So one other thing, when we talk about branding and how important it is now more than ever, one thing I always like to remind CMOs, CEOs, and startup founders is that you need to prioritize people, and you need to lead by example. You need to be excited about AI to get other people excited about AI. You have to have open conversations. You have to address concerns, right? Because not everyone is like us, right? 100% excited about it. Some people are very scared of it. They think it's going to take their job. So, you have to be open. You have to be empathetic with your team, as a CEO, as a CMO. But I want to give one example too. I was reading an article, I can't remember the company, but it was a startup company, and the CEO told his developers if they have an idea for a new feature or a new update or something to their product, instead of articulating it verbally, they're not allowed to do that anymore. They have to vibe code it. They have to build it. They have to build a mini MVP. Because it's one thing to say, I have this idea, I think it would be really cool, or this feature. It's another thing to literally vibe code a prototype of it, not build it out, but create like a mini MVP or micro MVP to present to the CEO and say, here's the idea for this new feature. Here's what it would look like, the UI, the UX, the workflow, what it would do, improvements. That's really compelling as opposed to being like, hey, what if we did this, right? So I think that approach is just awesome because it forces the person to flesh it out.
Yes, I love it because then you start moving from this, everyone has a freaking idea to show me.
Is it viable?
Is it viable?
Yeah.
And you mentioned the word vibe coding. I think most people are starting to get an understanding that there are tools that like Lovable, like Replit, like Cursor, that you can literally prompt naturally. Like here's what I'm trying to build, a website, this type of dashboard, and it will code it and it actually show you a prototype of it. And so it the world of coding is changing in that aspect, but I really love that because then it engages. I remember Google used to give like 10%, 15% of time available to people for innovation. Like they're like, you guys have that. That's ideas, right? Now it's more than ideas. It's ideas to prototype, ideas to validation. And wow, how much can innovation change? How much do you feel more appreciated as an employee if you actually have autonomy to do something like that? And I know that in certain companies they have hackathons to help support some of these types of ideas so that they get the employees involved. They have, just like they start to ask the employees, like, just start writing out things that you really hate to do. And these are the things that could, if you had your druthers, could be automated. It's these things to get people to see, and again, I say this at every pod, but it's important, these aha, oh shit moments, right? Because it's like, they start to unravel the uncertainty.
Those are my favorite moments.
100%. 100%. Now, in the same vein, you and I chatted about Palantir.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I would love in one aspect for you to give context on what Palantir does, and specifically we were talking data, and data is a big part of, where AI is headed. But their approach to sales specifically was something very interesting that you shared. So, and I have some perspective on it. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So, I have many opinions on Palantir. I'll focus on the, less controversial ones. But they're an incredibly innovative company, and they're growing incredibly fast. And their whole gig and game is data.
Every type of data.
Every type of data, but
very secure data.
Taking tons of data from lots of different sources, putting it together in a single dashboard where really key humans can make decisions from it. So the biggest sector is defense. In defense, and there's other sectors like this, but that's where they really have excelled, is taking tons of data and then putting it in front of decision makers so they can make very quick decisions. Because on the battlefield, that is the difference between success and failure. So everything from ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, to target acquisition, to assets, to human capital and things like that. There's a lot of things to keep purview of, and that's where Palantir shines, right? They take in intense data sets and then sift through it, surface certain things, prioritize certain things, and then show it to people to make decisions. But one thing that they employed that was pretty novel, I don't know, I think they were the first company to do it. There's probably iterations in other companies, but they did it at scale. And what they did is, instead of sending like a career sales development rep or salesperson to the client site to get an understanding of the project, do discovery, learn what the business objectives were, the business requirements of the project, what they were building for this client.
Right, the normal traditional models.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. They would send what they called forward deployed engineers, or FDEs. And this is around their core platform, which is called Foundry. And so what they would do is they would take the engineers that would, at the end of the day, be building that solution themselves by hand, and sent them out to the client site to talk to the client, the point of contact, whatever stakeholders needed to be involved, so that they were hearing directly from the customer what they needed to be built, how it needed to be built, the features that they needed, and then also be able to provide insight on, okay, well, there may be a bottleneck here, or there may be data security risk here in real time, right? And I think in the beginning, they had, they were shadowing a salesperson, right? And they were kind of, I think they didn't just, out of nowhere, Jessica's not going to come today. Gary's going to come, right? I think they did it intelligently. So I think it was like a hybrid team, and maybe the engineers stepped in, like, okay, well, I have one question about this. But it was a novel way of thinking to have the person building the product for the client in the room with the client, right? Instead of having a salesperson come back and explain what the client wants, their concerns, potential risks, things like that. And I think that was interesting, and I think
So what did that do?
So that allowed the engineers to. So there's less lost in translation, right? And we talked about this. Like salespeople are much different than they were 10 years ago, right? They're much more informed. They understand the tech much better, right? Like yourself, you're a perfect example. So I think the sales role is becoming much more hybridized. It's not just knowing the product anymore. It's a much deeper understanding of the customers, their potential pain points, their potential concerns around data security or other things. There's a lot of things that we still need salespeople to do, and they're very good at. You know what I mean, and contribute to the overall revenue of a company.
So I mean, I'll give some perspective.
But I think combining those two things is the ultimate thing, right? I think engineers aren't necessarily the best salespeople, but I always tell founders, if you're a CEO, you got to be good at sales. Like if you can't sell what you're building, you can't teach someone how to sell what you're building, right? Sure. If you can't articulate the value behind your product, it's going to be challenging for you to teach someone to do that. So I think the ultimate thing is having a really tech-savvy SDR, matched with someone they like and get along with that's an engineer that has a, technical background that might not be as, extroverted or knowledgeable about the audience at mass or en masse.
So I'm going to put this in perspective for us because anytime I get on a sales call talking about any sort of AI opportunity, I have our chief AI officer on the call with me.
Smart.
And initially, I do my first run and have the great conversation of and sometimes I have him on, sometimes I have him on second. But in our last couple calls, it's been really interesting because he's like, what? I'm just going to prototype something really quick.
Yeah.
And going back to your example,
it's tangible when someone sees but
the one about the employees.
Yep.
And for a second, I was like, do we send that to them now? In this process, but what it does, and I realize as we're learning, and just as a good learning for everybody, it's like. It gets them to feel like, wow, they get us. Mm-hmm. They get us quickly.
Absolutely.
If in 1 hour of a conversation they can get this far already, just imagine if we work together.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of where the accelerated sales cycle can become if you do it right.
I agree.
And I think to your point around the engineers, I do think there needs to be that hybrid engineer that understands business in a sense, right? Mm-hmm. I have that. It's not, obviously not just me. Our staff is pretty business savvy, or has had a lot of industry experience, right? And that's helpful, right?
Absolutely.
So then when you're putting somebody who's actually building in the room with the person who's saying, this is what I need, and then there's context and content in terms of hey, we've done this or this, that, whatever it is, it just has a different level of engagement.
I agree,
and personalization. So that's not AI. That's just relationships that cannot be changed with AI.
It is.
Right?
Yeah. And I think, I think these roles we're talking about are going to become slightly more nuanced. And you're going to start to see roles blending, right? Like what we're talking about. Engineers that can, talk about the products, or talk to customers better, right? Better understand customers. Sales, SDRs, or salespeople that, study, the tech and like the applications and the case study, so that when they meet with a prospective client or customer, they're like, hey, here's what we did for this company like you.
Right.
And if you do it right, that's you make sure that's a big competitor, right? Because like here's what your competitor's doing, we can do that for you better, right? So I think the marketers of yesteryear, the salespeople from yesteryear, the engineers, their roles are evolving, and I think that's because they have to. Not only because AI is disrupting some tasks within their jobs, but you need to know more. You can't be as siloed anymore. Like it always shocks me how many enterprise companies are so siloed because of culture or ego, and it's like, sales doesn't talk to marketing doesn't talk to sales, and like, or there's many other examples, but it's for many different reasons. But I think if we had more collaboration, we broke down those walls and silos. And software is helping with this. AI is helping with this. But I think it's a company culture thing. I think you have to nurture it from the top down, right?
Yeah.
From the CEO forward. So I think that's going to become more and more important.
Yeah, another example I like to share when it comes to sales and AI is one of the companies that I had on a previous podcast. They use an AI agent on their sales calls.
Sure.
For listening.
Yep.
And so they're listening
Passive.
for intent, like what are
Keywords.
the keywords,
Yep.
the emotions, the gestures, like, is this person really serious, or is this person saying something they're not really serious, and obviously you have to program and
Sure.
fine tune for that,
Sure.
and specifically for your products and otherwise. But what it's helped them do is accelerate the sales cycle for the folks that they know, like, oh, you know what, this person's on the verge of purchase.
Yeah.
We need to nurture them
Priority.
just a little bit more and
Yep.
prioritize versus, these 10 people, let's put them back in the nurture sequence. They're not there yet.
Right.
And those signals have never been able to be, identified unless they were subjective, they
Yeah.
were gut feelings.
Right.
You're putting information in a CRM system, and
Right.
but it's not so much of like it goes, hey, trigger that email.
Right.
Like,
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
hey, we just got some really great,
Yeah.
signals that this person's really interested. Let's really, take it to the next level with
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's that type of insight that we're receiving from AI that we've never been able to get from human beings before.
Yeah, I think that's an area that's very exciting to me, especially because it's scalable and because AI is getting very good at understanding intent, right? Keywords and voice intonation, but even like pauses, can indicate like reluctance or intent. But I also think that take it a step further and creating agents that are not only listening to like the discovery call, they're also like looking at that prospective client's competitors and seeing what they're doing, and surfacing those kind of insights. Like they just released this product or this feature. You have the talent and the resources, and it's in the budget. We could do this, to kind of compete with them or do it better or different. So I think, having something like an agent that listens on sales calls can be incredibly powerful and scalable. But then when you take, business use cases, applications in that client sector or industry and can surface them or bring them up, like that's super powerful.
Yeah.
Super powerful.
So two things in those comments. I mean, it's kind of crazy. I feel like AI is like forensics.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
It's like,
for
all
sure.
of a sudden, it's like all
For
those
sure.
police shows, CSI. You're like, it's like intent recognition.
Yeah.
It's like, computer vision where you're looking at all the camera. Like, that's what it is.
It's just exciting.
It is, right? And it's almost like when you think what like the FBI does, like all of a sudden you're doing that in your business, and then I go jump right into, okay, privacy, legal, ethics, what's right, what's wrong, where's that balance, right? Like, yes, you can, but should.
Right.
Should you?
Sure.
So that's my question to you, right? And it's like, how, and we don't know what we don't know. Like, I when I'm listening to people saying, we have these agents listening in, but like, these individuals don't know that they're listening in.
Right.
Is that a privacy thing? Is that wrong? Or is that just part of standard process these days?
So what's really important for everyone in your audience to know, especially CEOs, is that if you do not have a comprehensive, responsible use AI policy, there's no guidelines for your staff to understand what they can put in a ChatGPT, what they can't put in a ChatGPT,
or whatever system they're using.
Or whatever system they're using, right? It doesn't matter. An AI policy, a responsible use AI policy, is not just, I think there's a misconception, it's not just for the people that work at the company, right? To inform them what you're allowed to put into it, how you're allowed to use it, what you're not allowed to put into it. If you want to build a trustworthy, credible, legitimate brand, you are transparent. Part of being transparent is telling your customers, visitors to your website, users of your software, how you use AI, right? In layman's terms, because the average person isn't going to understand, the nuances or the granular, ways you use it. But in general terms, you really need to articulate how you're using AI. And you frame it from a positive perspective, right? Like, we're using it to improve your services. We're using AI to better understand customers like you, what you want, how to improve our products. Because really, that's what you should be doing, right? Not mine data and sell it to another company, right? That's not what you should be doing. So I think an AI policy is really key in that, right? Establishing not only what your internal staff can do with AI, but also telling your audience how you're using it, right? Like how you're using their data. Because if you now, not everyone's going to read your AI policy, but the fact that you have one today is really uncommon. Most companies are like, an AI policy? Like, what is that?
What is that?
It's really important. And then, the more you use AI and adopt it and integrate it, like, it's going to become critical because you don't want to get sued for something, that wasn't clear to your staff or your customers.
And it's interesting because if you think about marketing and sort of the world of like what the terms and conditions says you can and cannot do. A lot of this is under that, like legalese types of stuff, right?
Absolutely.
But again, it will protect you. I think as a consumer, we have to now almost believe that there's a lot of things that have AI on it. That's it. Like, trust and verify. If you're worried, check. Like,
do your own research.
You have to do your own research.
Do your own
because
research
I think there's
on legitimate,
there's
sources.
Right? And there's tricky marketing strategies, if I'm being honest. Like, even with unsubscribing from email lists to this day, some people make it very difficult to unsubscribe, where it gets very frustrating. Then you're like, ugh, whatever. So I doubt that people are gonna be like, hey, there's an AI listening versus, hey, I'm putting in my terms and conditions. This is where the legal world is going to have to come to some sort of agreement of what's okay and what's not. I always say look at the European regulations, especially because they've been so proactive,
strict
with
and proactive, which is a good thing in this area.
Because privacy, in your own data, there's everybody has their own opinion on that. What's the beauty of it in the world of AI is you're going to get much more hyper-personalized information, more hyper-personalized products. But people are also scared of it. I have this really funny example this week. My older daughter was at her friend's house, right? And this is just what we think is happening now with or without the AI. She's big into that, and all these kids are into F1 these days, which is like the NASCAR, not just NASCAR, but like all the racing and all that stuff. It's become a thing, a global
We've got
sensation.
that like F1 like arcade center here in DC now.
They've been twice. Yes,
that's awesome.
It's all but so she goes to her friend's house and she starts talking about it, and her friend's not really into it, right? And then they're talking for 10 minutes, and then her friend looks at her phone and looks at her Instagram feed, and all of a sudden, F1. Sean, F1. She's like, Mommy, she's like one driver after another.
Listening.
She's like, it's listening. And and I share this with them. We watched Social Dilemma the other day. I was like, that's not even with
that's probably with most privacy settings on or like at their default setting.
But are they like that? To me was like,
which is a low bar.
No, but it happens to me all the time, and it's not just so like, even when we think about conversational AI, what is it going to be listening to? What are we allowing it to listen to without knowing? to turn off a privacy setting.
Yeah.
You know, the last thing I'll say, and talking about privacy,
Sure.
and I do this
Sure.
PSA a lot, but
Sure.
like if you're using a large language model, there is a privacy setting in there to get you to say, I don't take my data and
train
share
the
it
model.
to train my model. Most people don't even know that.
It's on by default.
It's on by
intentionally
default.
in every model.
100%.
In every model.
100%. So it's, you know, these types of PSAs, this type of education that is needed,
Yeah.
not only as a executive or a founder in a company to look at it from one side, you always should be looking at it from both sides if you're going to be responsible with this technology.
Yeah, and one thing I want to add to that, and we've talked about this, but you know, to all the CEOs and business leaders, founders out there, if you know, there's a new feature in all the LLMs, Gemini, Copilot, and ChatGPT, and it's either called tools or connectors, right?
Okay.
And you can connect your ChatGPT to your Google Cloud Drive or your Box or your Dropbox Drive. Now, while that sounds really convenient and powerful, right? Because the idea is like, okay, you connect it to your own data, it can use it as context and reference, you know, for lots of different things. But you have to understand the implications of giving ChatGPT access to an entire cloud drive.
Let's talk about what this means. This is such an important,
really
I know this is
important.
one of your PSAs.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy, because we're so used to connecting to Google for sign-ons,
Yep.
right? That's just
SSO,
a normal, it's like a normal practice. So what I'm hearing from you, and I want you to go deeper in it, is now Gemini, and specifically that's Google's large language model, is allowing you to integrate with all your Google files, right? Which to me is like heaven, if I'm being honest.
Yep.
But the public service announcement is be careful because
well, so you know, it's one thing if it's your personal Google Drive or Dropbox or Box account, and you have a clear, granular understanding of every file in that cloud repository. Then sure, connect it. It's convenient. However, the majority of people are working at companies and it's a company cloud drive, or it's, you know, their users' drive on the company cloud. When you connect ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini to any external cloud storage platform, and again, it's very murky waters. We don't really know. These companies aren't going to tell us overtly what it's doing. It's all framed from a convenience, power user perspective. But what we think is that it scans everything in that drive and creates an index of all the files there and the types of files, so that very quickly you can query the data in your storage drive. And really quickly, that model will know, oh, they're talking about this client. We found it in this folder, and this is the campaign they're looking for. Take out, like, there's a drive, or there's like a subfolder of, employee data that has their social security numbers, or, there's financial projections, or really sensitive data that you really don't want OpenAI to have access to, like unfettered access. And the other thing I'll say is that, if you do that, make sure you have a CTO or a senior level IT person who takes ownership of that integration, of that connection, and anything bad that could happen, right? Make sure they know the files, they know who's connecting to it. But the last thing is, if you disconnect that Google Drive or Box or Dropbox, OpenAI doesn't email you a download of all the data that it ingested and potentially trained itself on. It just disconnects, right? So you don't really know what pieces of your data on that drive were retained inside the model. And there's all different things that, I won't get into, but there's leakage, there's prompt injection, there's ways for other people to potentially get data out of the model that you put into it, or that was in at some point your
So
cloud.
how do you
trust,
Sean? Because there's two ways of looking at it, because I've had conversations with folks at AWS, for example, and they're like, all of our stuff is encrypted. We do not take all your information. And, they're very strict on their policy because that's what they want to be known for. large language models like OpenAI, we don't know fully all. They're not extremely transparent, right?
No,
is
they're
it not worth the squeeze even from a personal side, or do you feel like, because you just made a distinction. If it's your personal data, it's okay, right?
And you know what's in there.
You know what's in there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so I guess it's like, because one of the biggest concerns early on with people was like, even if it's my own personal data, it's a lot of my IP.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's your notes, it's your life. It's important data about you that can be used all together to create a persona of you for good or bad things. Yeah. Right?
So, I mean, in our world, a RAG agent, something that will contain this information and you would have control over is a solution for it from an enterprise or just a solution set.
Yeah.
From a convenience perspective, though, that's all I want. And we're building some stuff around this for ourselves, which hopefully we'll be able to commercialize. But it's like, how do you I want to take all my vectors of data, including all my Apple Notes and all the things that I just do on a normal basis, and create my second brain. That's what we're doing, right?
Yeah. The ultimate assistant.
Ultimate assistant, and that's our goal. So it's an interesting thing. I think it's a personal decision. I think you've put out very strong reasons to ensure that there are systems and SOPs in place and people who are responsible for it. So you're not willy-nilly, integrating things that shouldn't be integrated.
Yeah. And let me be clear, it is a force multiplier. It is one of the most powerful, effective uses of generative AI to be able to leverage your own data to develop content, to develop business assets, to analyze massive data sets, all with contextual relevance to your brand. That's ultra powerful. And we talked about this before. That used to take teams and departments, a long time to do some of those things. What I want to just say and make clear is that, as with any new technology, concept, strategy, always do your own due diligence and research and put the right people in place. Because using that, right, as a RAG database, is incredibly powerful. And especially for startups, gathering a lot of data very quickly and being able to use it to make insights can help you get to market faster, identify product market fit better, scale quicker. But you have to have those things in place, right? Yeah. And that's key. So I'm all for it. Just make sure you do it right.
Yeah, and I also think there's an entrepreneurial opportunity there for some middleware to be created so that it's almost like, it's not cyber attacks per se, but there are some vectors, or I don't even know the right words. I'm just going to say it because this is a layman podcast. But to protect you or notify you if something was going to be leveraged in the way it shouldn't be leveraged or anything of that nature, right? So that extra level of security is there. And I think those are the standards that will be built over time and opportunities, again, for middleware and products to be built.
I think one term is threat intelligence. So, and that's getting more sophisticated.
Right.
Because, with lots of cool things happening with AI, on the nefarious side, scams are getting much more sophisticated. We talk about hyperpersonalization, right? Like, again, I'm an internal optimist, but you always have to consider the dark side or the other side, right? So like, you talk about hyperpersonalization for marketing, it's awesome. But then like a scammer, or a nefarious party who can find a bunch of relevant data points can send you a text that says like, hey, they can know what bank account you have. They can know what memberships you have and send you a text that says, hey, it's Francesca from this company that you have an account at. And, reference something or make it sound like there's a problem and click this link.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you always have...
It's phishing. And it's gotten much more advanced. Much more advanced. And you really, really got to be careful.
You do.
So I'm gonna change us to innovation now. So we've talked marketing.
Favorite topic.
We've talked sales.
Yes.
We've talked governance because it always comes up in every conversation, as it should.
Yep.
You and I, when we were prepping, we talked about wearables and physical AI. And, again, going back to your history with your dad and a bunch of other technology things that you've done, there is this aspect of now incorporating AI in physical things, right? And I think you have your your Ray-Ban glasses
I do.
right there.
Yeah,
Yes, you
my
do.
Ray-Ban Meta Stories. Yeah.
And for context, what can those Ray-Ban glasses do?
So, and this goes back to what you were talking about with listening and things like that, which I'll get to in a second. But basically, these are smart sunglasses from a collaboration between Meta and Ray-Ban, and this started 4 or 5 years ago. This is the third generation, which came out 2 years ago. Their next generation will come out at the beginning of next year, and that will actually be AR. So they'll start projecting
AR, augmented reality.
Right. So just like if you've ever been in a car that projects the speed limit or the map onto the windshield for the driver, it's the same concept. So it'll basically project your emails, your texts, alerts that are important to you right onto the lens of the sunglasses.
It's like Men in Black.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool, and it's these have been around a long time, but they're finally starting to be able to fit the tech in this format, right? Which the frame is where all the electronics are, but it's really cool because now there used to be a dedicated app called Meta View, which you use to import your videos and your photos from the Meta Ray-Bans. Now, in the last 6 months, Meta has changed that app to Meta AI. And Meta Ray-Ban is a tiny feature in the corner. You can query Llama just like any other chatbot with Meta AI. It's a dedicated
What do you
app.
mean you can query Llama? You're getting technical.
So just like you ask ChatGPT questions, if you've used Facebook Messenger or Instagram, like you can ask AI. You're talking to Llama, right? It's a massive, massive model.
Yeah.
That's also open source. But so these glasses can also access Llama. They can access the model.
Meta's model,
right. And in the Meta AI app, you can use it just like you would the ChatGPT app, but because the camera is connected to Llama, it can tell you what it sees. So if I'm like, at the botanical gardens and I'm like, what am I looking, Meta, hey Meta, what am I looking at? It'll say, oh, that's a philodendron, right? Or there's really cool accessibility features. So if you have, if you're vision impaired in any way, you could be at the grocery store and say, hey, Meta, is that an orange or a tangerine? So it's able to...
Are you conversating with it?
Yes, yeah. So there's very discreet little speakers right above your ear, which I like because I don't necessarily love to put things in my ears. I like to hear my surroundings and things, which is one reason I like it. But I could have a phone call with you on here. But one thing about the listening, so it's really aggressive. So by default, as you'd expect, hey Meta is on all the time, and which means it's always listening. And for those of you out there that don't understand this, Alexa, Google Home, Apple Pod, if it's not muted, it's always listening for the wake word and everything else, right? And it's yet to be determined what they're listening for, what they capture, what they don't. But best rule of thumb is keep those devices muted unless you're using them regularly.
How do you keep them muted? You just say
there's
mute.
A button on every device. So on Alexa, there is a microphone with a cross through it.
Okay.
And when you push that button, it turns red, which means it's muted. It won't hear Hey Alexa, and all devices have it, right? But this is the reason you say like, hey Seema, let's go sailing, next week. And maybe I send that to you in a Facebook Messenger message, and then like we both start getting like sailing lessons, rent a sailboat, like a few days later. And if you look in the EULA, the Electronic User License Agreement, the very fine print, you see things like voice and messages may be sent to Meta to better provide advertising interests or things like that. And it's like, that's just a really vague term of listening to everything.
They're always listening, but you just taught me something I didn't know about that mute button.
Yes, it's important for people to understand that because IoT, Internet of Things, is going to explode. There was rumors a while ago of Amazon AWS working with Anthropic to integrate Claude into Alexa to make Alexa much smarter. So it's not like, hey Alexa, what's on my calendar? Or hey, what's the weather? It's like, hey, I want to go to Tahiti, in between these dates. I want to be this close to the beach. I want to be this close to a Michelin star restaurant. Build out an itinerary, right? Where it'll go do that and then email it to you. We can do that with most
ChatGPT, any large language model today.
But being able to be sitting on your couch and do it is cool. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So they're evolving. So knowing how to mute them is really important. But also, I don't think people realize what's going on with robotics either, right? And that's like a whole nother rabbit hole. But I think robotics is advancing, at the same clip as AI. Most of the applications are industrial and like very heavy commercial, right? And people aren't in warehouses typically or in industrial environments. And the ones that aren't, robotics is advancing insanely fast because AI is powering, and this is what physical AI is, right? Physical AI is not just robotics, it's Internet of Things, it's AI infused in almost any hardware.
Right.
But it's really exciting, and it's an area that I keep a very close eye on. And I'll give a shout out to a very close friend of mine, Jasmeet Singh. He's been a roboticist and engineer for 15 years. He's been a VC for about the same amount of time, and he solely focuses on investing in physical AI companies. And him and I geek out a lot. And if it's okay, I would love to just kind of put a concept out there. I don't know that most people are familiar with, called the uncanny valley.
Okay, I don't know what that is. Please explain.
So this is a really fascinating concept. I'd heard of it before I met Jasmeet, but Jasmeet really kind of put it in perspective for me and just made it much more fascinating to me. So, today you're walking down the street, you don't see robots in the street. You don't see them doing tasks. The one place you may see them is, on K Street or, in your federal buildings in the lobby, they may have like a passive, very short, non-humanoid robot that's just kind of keeping eyes on things. It's noticing things. It's picking up some of the things we talked about before, body language, behavior, and it's assessing threats, right? Like certain body language gives off more
aggression versus
exactly.
others.
It's the same stuff TSA is looking for when you're waiting in line at the airport. So we're not seeing robots, en masse in different applications. But whereas in China, it's very common to see, police-assisted robots that are still passive. They're just with other human police officers. It's much more common in China to see robots on the street, humanoid and non-humanoid. And where the uncanny valley comes into play, this is a concept that is very, very much based on human perception and human cognition and humans' relationship with machines. Okay, so it's much easier and more comfortable for a human brain to see a robot that doesn't look like themselves. Exactly.
Yes, I've had this conversation.
And so that's why we don't really think much of it, and I don't think we will for a while. When we see a security bot, right, in an office lobby or, at a football game, maybe there's like, a robot.
Yeah.
The uncanny valley is the distance between humans being comfortable with non-humanoid robots, very short, tiny, you think of Star Trek or Star Wars, C-3PO, little non-threatening robots. So the uncanny valley is the distance between humans being comfortable with those types of robots and humanoid robots that look like us, act like us, talk like us, have facial expressions, can smile, and it's a big gap, right? And so it's going to take some time to overcome that uncanny valley. Like, we are by no means ready to see machines that look like us on the streets or doing human tasks, right? Like, that's a huge leap. So, first we'll see applications of, robots in like assisted living, right? Mm-hmm. Or in areas where they have a finite list of tasks, right? Like, give this person this type of medicine at this type of day, make sure they're okay, talk to them. There's lots of scenarios where robots with a closed loop system that have finite tasks can be applied very effectively, right? It's very different to introduce them in a home with kids, right? With pets. So I always like to kind of illustrate what the uncanny valley is to kind of like prepare people, because like, and I'm not going to say like when, but like eventually we will see machines that like look like us, talk like us, and like. So my understanding that's from Elon, kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Elon has shared, and I've shared this a couple times on the pod, but by 2040 we're going to have more humanoids than people on this planet.
Yep.
That's
Neuralink,
crazy.
yep.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, there's a lot in that. Like right now, I was just at an AI expo, and they had from Boston Dynamics. It was like the dog robot, right?
Yep.
And that thing, like I've done a couple posts on social. I'm like, cool, but crazy, right? Cool, but crazy.
Yeah.
And the reality is, because that thing is going to be in combat soon.
They can do backflips now.
It can do backflips, but it could also shoot bombs. Like, let's just be real.
Absolutely, yeah. It's terrifying what can be mounted to it.
And then because I'm a nerd like you, my Instagram feed has a lot of AI. It has a lot of robotics. So I do see those from China, like these the faces aren't fully there yet, but like very human-like robots running around, and people are awing, and it's like awe and shock, right? That shock and awe type of thing. Yeah. But it's happening, and part of me was like, is that actually AI? Like, or are they there? And I know that they are much further along in introducing it to people, right? And I think you're absolutely right. And I think again, we're at a place, it's not just AI, it's robotics, it's quantum, it's fusion. Blockchain, it's fusion. Huge. Right?
Huge.
And so, the one thing at a time.
It's all connected.
One thing at a time.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
But like, and I think for this particular podcast, like why I focus a lot on the business side is because we can control certain things here. Yeah. And knowing what's coming down the pike, and as we talked about marketing, we started first on like, where is it going? Hyperpersonalization. People are going to start to build that infrastructure. That's for planning purposes, because that has real business outcome implications, obviously consumer, applications as well. But as we get into all these other things, I'm glad we started talking about it here. This is that pod that's just going to give you guys insights, because the sci-fi stuff. Yeah. I mean, look at your glasses. It's truly like Will Smith and Men in Black.
And most people don't even realize, right, that these are smart glasses. Yeah. They have a camera. And it's good that there's an LED light that comes on when you are recording to kind of tell people around you, I'm recording, right? And and I'm very cognizant and sensitive to that, right? Like in certain environments, I don't bring them or use them. But I mean, like, the form factor has gotten so good. Like, and again, I'm a beta tester for Meta, so I get a slight discount on this. Yeah. And I can shake my device to report. I'm the same for Snapchat. Snapchat, people forget, came out with spectacles like 7 or 8 years ago. They were the first like smart glasses that you could take little snaps with. You could add, stickers and things, but they've come a long way. Yeah. They've come a long, and they're going to be more prevalent. So real quick. This is Ray-Ban and Meta. Meta's also working with Oakley to create a sports version right now. You can check them out. And then Google's working with Warby Parker. Mm-hmm. So you're going to see a lot more smart glasses. Everyone, when it's sunny out, wears sunglasses. Mm-hmm. These you can get in prescription. You can get in transition lenses. Right. So you could be wearing them every day, right? Right. So there's going to be more of them out there. The cost is going to come down. So they'll be more accessible. And I think that's really where the adoption curve will spike. Yeah, for the wearables. For the wearables, yes. The beginning of wearables. So let's give you an opportunity to kind of baseline marketing, sales, innovation, current state, future state, and then I'm going to get into some rapid fires. Sure. So marketing, sales, and what else? Innovation. Marketing, sales, and innovation. I think it's really important to remember that humans should be the priority in any, new technology adoption. Making sure your people are comfortable with it, understanding it, the benefits, but also the risks. I think it's very easy to get excited about AI and try to rush to adopt it and integrate it with existing operations, and sometimes overlook people that might be a little apprehensive about moving that quickly, or it could be generational. It could be just their particular role in the company, right? So I think with sales, marketing, and innovation, especially when you in the context of generative AI and business use cases, like always remember to prioritize humans. Keep them in the loop. Make sure they understand the plans of how you're going to incorporate it. Also, if you're a CEO, hopefully you should be on the front lines. You should kind of have an understanding of what's going on, but you're not the one doing everyone's job. So I say that because you could get really great insights or ideas from other people in your company. So encourage them to try new things with AI, right? In a sandbox, in a safe environment. Use tools like Figma to rapid prototype, vibe code to like create something quickly, to show its viability. But things are changing, and just, be open-minded at the end of the day. When it comes to sales and marketing and innovating in your space, I think one area that's really important, especially for startups and founders, oftentimes a very unique data set or very direct access to a very unique data set is your moat, right? And is your IP. So, I have a lot of conversations with VCs and private equity and family offices, and, a lot of times one of my recommendations is like invest in vertical AI, right? And sometimes I have to explain that, so I will very quickly. But vertical AI is AI systems and tools and software that cater to a very specific vertical, right? Finance, healthcare, education, right? And so you look at that entire vertical from the bottom up, and then you build artificial intelligence solutions that literally address almost every problem, bottleneck, challenge, not risk, right? Because we're still navigating that. But that's really where I get excited, is these vertical AI companies that are just tackling like these really nuanced problems in an entire sector, right? And that's very difficult to do. These companies that just spin something up, or, as we call them, ChatGPT wrappers, they're a dime a dozen, right? And they fade out. But where the real long-term excitement, investment, growth is in AI infrastructure and vertical AI, right?
I think we're going to see a lot of these smaller AI companies start to be bought up.
Oh, absolutely. The M&A era is moving quickly.
We're at that moment in time for consolidation because there are so many awesome companies, but they're very narrow.
Yeah.
And to become vertical, you don't have to be the one building it all. You can be the one acquiring them to integrate it. So I see a lot of that happening. So I'm going to ask you quick ones, rapids. You ready?
I'm ready. Hit me.
Most underrated AI tool right now?
Notebook LM.
Why?
Google Notebook LM, let me be clear. Why? Because just the sheer power of what it's capable of. It is, you can think of it as a simplified, lower learning curve, more accessible custom GPT, where you can tell it exactly the files you want it to look at, the PDFs, the Excel spreadsheets, images, literally URLs, and then query that corpus of data that you defined for it. It doesn't look at anything else. And then with one click of a button from that data, and files and resources, you can create a FAQ. You can create a study guide. You can create what they call a briefing doc. You can create a two-person podcast-style conversation about the data in the sources window. And
really
it's a free tool. It's a free tool. And not too long ago, Google released a standalone mobile app. So now there's a mobile app native for, I think it's on iOS too, but I know it's on Android. So it's just incredible. Highly recommend checking it out.
Most overrated AI tool?
Most overrated AI tool. Ooh. I would have to say maybe Jasper. Yeah.
It's a content writer.
I think it lazifies people.
Okay.
I think it doesn't encourage people to have expertise and what you talked about, gut instinct and what works in marketing and what doesn't. It tries to it's pretty good at like figuring out what the message should be, understanding a brand's tone, personality thing, but I think some people are relying too heavily on, and I won't say maybe Jasper, but like Jasper-esque platforms where it tries to create content that is really, really, really on brand, or messaging or ad creative. Like you really
without
need
adding context,
or a human. Like I think it's very good, but I think too many people are too reliant on it and just kind of spin something up and assume it's on brand, the messaging good, as the creative will resonate, without using their own expertise or asking somewhere else or collaborating on the strategy. Like, so I think it's almost taking the fun, or at least for me, the fun out of, that really like exciting raw collaborative brainstorming that a group of humans do. And it is one of the reasons, I still do marketing and love creative collaboration.
One trend in AI marketing that you're sick of?
One trend in AI marketing that I'm sick of.
Yeah.
Oh man, there's a lot of them. I would just say, all of the kind of negative stuff out there, like some of the deep fakes of certain people saying things they never did, the scams, there's this very broad category, and we've talked about this, that's called AI slop, right? And one thing I like to say is, it's great to use AI to help you generate content, but the thing about content is, with it being so easy to create, there's a lot of garbage out there.
Yes, there is.
So it's saturated. So the brands, and this goes back to creating a really powerful brand that's magnetic and people want to tell their friends about and are loyal to, is that you really need to understand your customers. You really need to be able to, lay out a framework that takes into consideration what your customers are saying at every touch point and is kind of a continuous loop, instead of just generating what you think your customers will like, right? Which is what a lot of people are doing.
Yeah,
so.
well, I talk to my AI all the time with added context.
Yep, exactly.
Because if you don't, then you're going to continue to be generic all the time. Bold predictions for sales and AI in the next few years.
Yeah. Well, let me go back real quick 1 second. I want to say something about content, because I think people think or feel bad or guilty when they use AI to create content. As long as you're creating really valuable content, nobody cares if you're using AI, right? If it's insightful, if it helps someone, if it's resourceful, and you used AI to create it, but you infused your own expertise and you did research and it's factually accurate, awesome, right? Google's not going to penalize you. So I just want to say, I don't want to shame any AI content generators about that. But sorry. So
no, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
So bold predictions of AI and sales in the next few years.
Bold predictions of AI and sales. I think, like many positions, AI will help make sales jobs easier and more scalable. I think SDRs and salespeople in general will be able to talk to human more customers, automate a lot of the drudge work, the paperwork, some of the analytics, some of the dashboard populating, reporting. I think in sales, what's really lost focus is the ability of one person to understand another person's problem and then create a solution or help the team or the company create a solution that really, really speaks to that customer's problem or issue or what they want at a granular level. And I think salespeople will get better at that using AI, looking at data. But then, having a 3 or 4 hour, in-depth, discovery meeting or call with, the entire C-suite or group of stakeholders, taking that 3-hour conversation and pulling out the really important things that were mentioned, and using that instead of sitting there and listening to 4 hours of a meeting, transcript and things like that. So I think it's just going to be able to, it's specifically with sales and marketing, but, make faster, better decisions from data, spend more time with human customers, empathizing with what they're trying to do, understanding it, and just be super, super efficient when it comes to, sales activities and sales tasks.
So last question, favorite use of an AI tool in your own business that you use this month?
Favorite tool? Probably Google AI Studio. It's one of my most used tools. I use it for a lot of different things, but I'll say I am biased because my entire business runs on Google Workspace. So, Gemini is aggressively integrated with it in every piece and software of the ecosystem. So, if I'm building an agent or an automation workflow or an application that's somewhat simple or somewhat finite and doesn't need to do a lot of reasoning or long horizon thinking or decision making, I'll use Google AI Studio. If I want to do something more complex, advanced, nuanced, sophisticated with decision making, then I'll use Vertex. But those are two of my favorite tools, just because the sheer power of them, and they're in the Google
suite,
and ecosystem that I'm very, very familiar with. It's the same reason I like Notebook LM and Gemini, right? Like everything is like streamlined. It's the same reason people like Apple products, right? Like they function in a comfortable way people are used to. So definitely Vertex AI and AI Studio right now. Be different tomorrow.
Listen, Sean, thank you so much for coming out.
Yeah.
We kept talking. I think it was like an hour and 50 minutes right now.
Wow. Yeah. No, I mean, this is my favorite thing to talk about. So it's been wonderful.
And no, it's been great to get your insights on marketing and sales. And the wearable conversation, I think, was very interesting because, this market is it's been around.
It has.
But I think it's about to take off in ways that we have never seen before. So thank you again for all of your insights.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening this week. I really know that you got a tremendous amount of value on sales, on marketing, on innovation, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Please make sure you subscribe, like, and comment, and spread the word. Every week we're going to bring more and more insights and experts to you. See you next week.